Malcolm Brantley cut through his steak with practiced precision, the same way he approached everything in his life. The blade separated meat from bone with clean strokes, each cut deliberate and efficient. Across the dinner table, his 10-year-old son Nico pushed peas around his plate, making small towers that he'd knock down with his fork. "Eat your vegetables," Avery said, her voice carrying that familiar warmth that made neighbors stop her at the grocery store to chat. She smiled at Malcolm, her blonde hair catching the kitchen light like spun gold. Her blue eyes sparkled with the kind of contentment that made other wives envious. "How was the shop today?" "Good. Finished the Peterson job early." Malcolm chewed slowly, savoring the perfectly seasoned meat. Avery had a gift for cooking that turned simple ingredients into restaurant-quality meals. "Might take on that church contract Lucy mentioned. Your sister's always got ideas for you." Avery's laugh tinkled like wind chimes on a summer breeze. "More money would be nice, though." Nico's growing out of everything. The house around them reflected 11 years of careful building. Wedding photos lined the mantel, showing a younger Malcolm in his dress blues standing beside Avery in white lace. Family vacation pictures from the Grand Canyon, Disneyland, camping trips in the mountains. The mortgage was paid off 2 years early thanks to Malcolm's discipline with money and Avery's careful budgeting. Nico looked up from his pea construction project, his dark hair falling into eyes that mirrored his father's. "Dad, can you help me with my math homework after dinner?" "Sure thing, son." Malcolm felt the deep satisfaction of a man who'd built something solid. 11 years married to a woman who kept their home spotless, cooked meals that made his mouth water, and never complained about his long hours at the fabrication shop. Their house in Flagstaff might not be the biggest on the block, but it was theirs. Secure. A foundation for the future. The evening light streaming through their kitchen window painted everything golden. Avery moved around the table, refilling glasses and collecting plates with the efficient grace of someone who'd perfected the rhythm of family life. She hummed softly as she worked, a habit that had charmed Malcolm since their first date. "Mrs. Patterson stopped by today," Avery said, loading the dishwasher. "Her grandson's getting married next month. She wanted to know if we'd cater the rehearsal dinner. You thinking about it?" "Maybe. I've been getting more requests lately. People love my cooking." Malcolm watched his wife move through their kitchen like a dancer who knew every step by heart. She'd talked about starting a catering business for years, but never seemed to find the time. Between keeping house and taking care of Nico, she stayed busy enough. After dinner, Malcolm sat with Nico at the kitchen table, guiding his son through fractions while Avery cleaned up around them. The dishwasher hummed in the background, mixing with the scratch of pencil on paper and Nico's occasional frustrated sighs. "Dad, you're really good at math," Nico said, erasing another mistake. "Marines taught me to be precise. Everything has to add up right, or people get hurt. Were you scared in the war?" Malcolm paused, considering how much truth a 10-year-old could handle. "Sometimes, but scared doesn't mean you quit. It means you get careful. You pay attention to details other people might miss." "Like what?" "Like knowing which roads are safe to drive on, which people you can trust, how to spot danger before it spots you." Nico nodded with the seriousness of a child trying to understand adult concepts. "Would you teach me that stuff?" "You bet. But right now, let's focus on these fractions." Around 10:30, they all went to bed. Malcolm fell asleep easily, his body tired from a good day's work, his mind quiet with the contentment of a man who'd earned his rest. He woke at 2 in the morning feeling like someone had stabbed him in the gut with a red-hot poker. Sweat soaked his sheets, and his stomach cramped with waves of pain that took his breath away. The room spun when he tried to sit up. "Malcolm." Avery's voice came soft and concerned in the darkness. "What's wrong?" "Stomach's killing me." He doubled over, fighting the urge to vomit. The pain radiated from his core through his whole body. Avery sat up immediately, her hand cool and gentle on his forehead. "You're burning up. Must be something you ate." "Maybe." The cramps hit again, worse this time, like his intestines were twisting into knots. She slipped out of bed, her bare feet silent on the hardwood floor. "I'll make you some tea. Chamomile always helps settle stomachs." Malcolm gritted his teeth, waiting for the pain to pass. "Food poisoning, probably." He'd eaten that gas station jerky yesterday afternoon when he'd been too busy to stop for a proper lunch. That had to be it. Avery returned with a steaming mug and sat beside him on the bed, stroking his damp hair while he sipped the tea. The warmth helped settle his stomach, and her touch was comforting in the way only a wife's could be. "Better?" she whispered. "Yeah, thanks. I love you, Malcolm. I hate seeing you hurt like this." "Love you too." But the cramping returned twice more before dawn, each time leaving him weaker and more confused. By morning, he felt like he'd been hit by a truck, but the worst symptoms had passed. Avery made him breakfast and fussed over him before he left for work, making him promise to call if he felt sick again. Malcolm attributed the episode to bad food and put out of his mind. He had work to do. 3 weeks later, Malcolm stood in Dr. Hanson's sterile office, reading his blood test results over the doctor's shoulder. The numbers meant nothing to him, but Dr. Hanson's expression was reassuring. "Everything looks normal," Dr. Hanson said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. "White blood count's fine. No signs of infection or inflammation." "Then why do I feel like garbage?" Malcolm's hands had developed a constant pins and needles sensation that made gripping tools difficult. "This isn't normal for me. Could be stress. Running a business isn't easy, especially in this economy." Malcolm wanted to argue. He'd handled combat stress in Afghanistan, where every day meant the possibility of death. A metal shop in peaceful Arizona shouldn't be breaking him down. But the tingling had spread up his arms, and his head felt wrapped in cotton most mornings. "I'll prescribe something for the nausea," Dr. Hanson continued, scribbling on his prescription pad. "And maybe consider taking some time off. When's the last time you took a real vacation?" Can't afford vacations. You can't afford to work yourself into the ground either. Come back in 2 weeks if symptoms persist. They persisted and got worse. Over the next 6 months, Malcolm's world gradually shrunk. Tasks that once seemed effortless became monumental challenges. Walking from his truck to the shop entrance left him winded. Lifting heavy steel required rest breaks that embarrassed him in front of his employees. The tingling in his hands became a constant companion, making precision work nearly impossible. He'd been known throughout Flagstaff for his ability to create intricate metalwork, but now his hands shook when he tried to hold a welding torch steady. "Maybe you should see a specialist," suggested his employee Dave, after Malcolm had to sit down halfway through a simple cutting job. "Already have. 3 of them." Each doctor had run different tests: blood work, urine analysis, CT scans, MRIs. Each had found nothing definitive. His symptoms came and went without apparent pattern: stomach cramps, tingling extremities, memory lapses that left him standing in rooms wondering why he'd gone there, and a bone-deep fatigue that made climbing stairs feel like running marathons. Dr. Williams, the 3rd specialist, had been the most direct. "I'm not saying you're making this up, but stress manifests physically more than most people realize. Your wife mentioned you've been forgetting things." That statement stopped Malcolm cold. "Avery talked to you." "She called yesterday. Very concerned. Said you forgot to pick up your son from school last week." Malcolm remembered that day differently. Nico had told him soccer practice was canceled due to rain. But when Malcolm arrived at the empty school parking lot, he'd found Nico sitting alone on the front steps, looking small and abandoned. There was confusion about the schedule, Malcolm said carefully. Memory issues combined with your other symptoms could indicate several conditions: early onset dementia, Parkinson's, even certain autoimmune disorders. The words hit Malcolm like physical blows. He was 39 years old, too young for any of those diseases. "We should run more comprehensive tests," Dr. Williams continued. Cognitive evaluation, detailed neurological workup. The tests showed the same, slightly abnormal levels as before. Nothing that screamed disease, but nothing completely normal either. Malcolm existed in a medical limbo where doctors acknowledged something was wrong but couldn't identify what to take home. Avery grew more attentive as his condition worsened. She researched his symptoms online, printing out articles about various neurological conditions. She made special meals designed to boost brain function, brought him herbal tea every evening, and set up a pill organizer to make sure he took all his vitamins. "You work too hard," she said one evening, massaging his shoulders while he sat slumped at the kitchen table. Maybe it's time to consider slowing down. Can't slow down. Got bills to pay, employees depending on me. We have savings. Good insurance. You don't have to carry everything alone. Her fingers worked at the knots in his neck, but Malcolm felt disconnected from his own body, like he was watching someone else's life through thick, distorting glass. Even Avery's touch, which had always comforted him, felt distant and unreal. What if it gets worse? He asked. Then we'll deal with it. Together. That's what marriage means. By the 1-year mark, Malcolm's daily routine had become a series of small battles. Getting dressed in the morning required planning and rest breaks. Driving to work meant fighting waves of dizziness. Operating machinery became dangerous as his coordination deteriorated. You're scaring me, Avery told him after he came home with bandaged fingers from a workshop accident. What if you hurt yourself badly? What if something happens to you at work and nobody's there to help? Malcolm stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror that night. His face looked gaunt, age beyond his years. His eyes had lost their military sharpness, replaced by confused uncertainty that made him look like a stranger. Get it together, he told his reflection. Marines don't fall apart. But something fundamental was falling apart. He just couldn't figure out what. Malcolm overheard Avery talking to their neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, over the backyard fence one October afternoon. He'd come home early from work, feeling dizzy after nearly passing out while operating the metal-cutting saw. I'm worried sick about him, Avery was saying, her voice carrying that note of genuine concern that made everyone want to help her. He's been so off lately, forgetting things, getting confused about simple tasks. Malcolm paused by the back door, listening through the screen. Something in Avery's tone made him want to hear more. That's just terrible, Mrs. Patterson replied with the sympathy of someone who'd raised 4 children and buried one husband. He's so young to be having these problems. The doctors can't figure it out. They've run every test imaginable. Avery's voice carried a slight tremor, as if she was fighting back tears. His sister Lucy thinks it might be early onset dementia. Malcolm's father had memory problems before he died. Malcolm froze. His father had died in a car accident at 55 after working a double shift at the lumber mill. His memory had been sharp as a tack until the day he died. Has he seen a neurologist? 3 of them. They keep running more tests, but Avery's voice broke slightly. I don't know how to tell Nico. He keeps asking why Daddy acts strange sometimes. Malcolm felt anger flare in his chest. He didn't act strange. He was sick, yes, but not strange. And certainly not in ways that would confuse a 10-year-old. Children are resilient, Mrs. Patterson said. They adapt better than adults sometimes. I hope so. I just want my husband back. Malcolm pushed through the back door, making enough noise to announce his presence. Both women looked up with expressions of concern and surprise. Oh, honey. Avery's face lit up with relief, though her eyes remained worried. You're home early. How are you feeling? Fine, Malcolm said, though his hands were shaking again and his vision felt slightly blurred up. Mrs. Patterson gave him a sympathetic smile. Take care of yourself, Malcolm. Avery's been telling me how worried she is about you. After their neighbor left, Avery put her arms around Malcolm's waist, her head resting against his chest. I hate talking about your health with others, but I needed someone to listen. I'm so scared, Malcolm. Scared of losing you. Why did you tell her about my father? Avery pulled back, looking confused. What do you mean? You said he had memory problems. He didn't. Malcolm, honey, he absolutely did. Don't you remember how he got lost driving to the grocery store? How he forgot your mother's birthday 3 years running? How he started putting salt in his coffee instead of sugar? Malcolm tried to remember. His father had been distracted near the end, working too many hours to pay for his mother's medical bills. But memory problems? I don't think. Sweetheart, you were deployed when it got really bad. Your mom told me all about it when we were first married. She was so worried about you developing the same problems. Avery's voice was gentle, patient, the way people spoke to confused children. Maybe your memory of that time isn't completely clear either. That night, Malcolm lay awake staring at the ceiling, trying to piece together memories of his father's final years. Had there been signs of dementia? Was Malcolm's recollection faulty, colored by distance and time? The uncertainty gnawed at him. If he couldn't trust his own memories, how could he trust his perception of what was happening to him now? A week later, he found Nico sitting on his bed after school, looking troubled and small. "What's wrong, son? Mom told me something, and I don't know if I should ask you about it." Malcolm sat beside his boy, noting how Nico leaned away slightly. "You can ask me anything, Nico. Always. She said your brain is sick sometimes, but she's going to take care of you, so you don't have to worry." The words hit Malcolm like a punch to the gut. What exactly did she say? That sometimes you can't remember things right, and that's why you get confused and forget stuff. But it's not your fault, and I shouldn't worry because Mom knows how to take care of sick people. Malcolm felt the world tilt sideways. "I'm not that sick, Nico, but you forgot about my school concert last week, and you called me Nathan yesterday when you were helping with homework." Malcolm had no memory of calling his son by the wrong name. But Nico wouldn't lie about something like that. "Even if I get confused sometimes, I still love you more than anything in the world. You know that, right?" Nico nodded, but his eyes held a doubt that cut Malcolm deeper than any physical pain. His own son was starting to see him as broken, unreliable. That night, Malcolm found Avery in the kitchen, cleaning up after dinner. "We need to talk about what you're telling Nico." "About what?" "About my condition. About me being sick." Avery turned to face him, dish towel in her hands. "Malcolm, I'm just trying to help him understand why you've been acting differently. Children need explanations. I haven't been acting that differently." "Honey, you have. You really have." Her voice was infinitely patient. "Last week you stood in the garage for 20 minutes, just staring at your tools like you'd never seen them before. You asked me 3 times in one day what we were having for dinner. You put your car keys in the refrigerator." Malcolm had no memory of any of those incidents. But if Avery said they happened, and if Nico was noticing changes too, then maybe his perception of reality was more damaged than he'd realized. "I'm scared," he admitted. "I know, sweetheart. I'm scared too. But we'll get through this together." She held him then, and Malcolm buried his face in her shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume. She felt solid and real in a world that was becoming increasingly uncertain. "You look like hell," Lucy Miles said when Malcolm walked into her medical clinic on a gray November morning. His sister never sugarcoated anything, a trait that had irritated him as a child, but now felt like a lifeline to honesty. "Thanks for the bedside manner, sis." Lucy studied his face with the clinical detachment she'd developed over 15 years as a nurse practitioner. She saw past the brother she'd grown up with to the patient presenting concerning symptoms. "When's the last time you slept through the night without waking up sick?" Malcolm had to think about it. "Can't remember. Couple months, maybe. That's what I'm worried about." She gestured to a chair in her private office. "Sit. Tell me everything, and don't leave out details because you think they're embarrassing or unimportant." Malcolm described the symptoms chronologically, from the first night of severe cramping to the current daily struggles with memory and coordination. Lucy took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions that demonstrated her medical training. "What about environmental factors?" she asked. "Anything new at work? Different chemicals, new processes, unusual fumes. Same shop I've run for 8 years. Same materials, same safety protocols. Home environment. Nothing's changed there either. Avery keeps the house cleaner than a hospital." Lucy tapped her pen against her notepad. "These symptoms, the pattern of onset, the way they've progressed, it doesn't fit any standard neurological condition I'm familiar with. 3 doctors have told me the same thing. That's exactly why I want you to see someone outside Flagstaff. Someone who doesn't know you, doesn't know Avery, doesn't have any preconceived notions about what might be wrong." "Why outside town?" "Because small towns have small medical communities. Sometimes doctors talk to each other, share assumptions. Information gets passed around that might influence diagnosis." Lucy leaned forward. "I want completely independent analysis. You think the doctors here are wrong. I think they're focused on finding a neurological explanation because that's what your symptoms suggest. But what if the problem isn't neurological? What if it's something else entirely?" 2 weeks later, Malcolm made the 3-hour drive to Phoenix to meet with Dr. Elizabeth Kumar, a toxicologist Lucy had found through professional networks. The appointment required a full day off work, something Malcolm could barely afford a doctor. Kumar's office was different from the small-town medical practices Malcolm was used to. Modern, sterile, filled with equipment he didn't recognize. She was younger than he'd expected, perhaps 40, with graying hair and intelligent eyes that seemed to see everything. "Tell me about your daily routine," she said after reviewing his medical history. "Everything from when you wake up until you go to bed." Malcolm walked through his typical day, from Avery's morning smoothies to his evening vitamins. Dr. Kumar asked detailed questions about his diet, his work environment, his exercise habits, even his hobbies. "I'm going to run some different tests," she said. "Hair analysis, not just blood work. Hair can show exposure to substances over a longer period." "What kind of substances?" "That's what we're going to find out." The wait for results stretched 2 weeks. Malcolm continued working, continued fighting symptoms, continued wondering if he was losing his mind. When Dr. Kumar called with results, her voice was carefully neutral. "I need you to come in to discuss the findings. Can't you tell me over the phone? This is a conversation we need to have in person." Malcolm made the drive to Phoenix again, this time with a growing sense of dread. Dr. Kumar's office felt smaller, more oppressive than during his first visit. "Your test results show something concerning," she said without preamble. "Your hair analysis reveals trace amounts of substances that shouldn't be present in your system." Malcolm leaned forward. "What substances?" "Thallium and ethylene glycol. Both are highly toxic, but the levels suggest chronic exposure rather than acute poisoning." "I don't know what those are." "Thallium is a heavy metal, historically used in rat poison. Ethylene glycol is the main component in antifreeze. Both can cause the exact symptoms you've been experiencing if administered in small doses over an extended period." The room seemed to spin. "Administer?" "Malcolm, these substances don't occur naturally in the human body. They don't appear in food or water supplies. Someone would have to deliberately ingest them." "You're saying someone's poisoning me?" Dr. Kumar chose her words carefully. "I'm saying your test results are inconsistent with natural illness or accidental exposure. The patterns suggest intentional administration." Malcolm drove home in a fog of disbelief. Who would poison him? And why? The idea seemed impossible, something from a movie or a crime novel. But as he replayed the last year in his mind, certain details began clicking into place. How his symptoms always seemed worse at home than at work. How Avery had started discussing his condition with neighbors and doctors before he'd even recognized some of the symptoms himself. How she always seemed to know when he was having a bad day before he mentioned IT and O. That was paranoid thinking. Avery loved him. She'd been nothing but supportive through his illness. But doubt, once planted, grew roots that spread through his mind like poison. Malcolm made a decision that felt both paranoid and necessary. He would conduct an experiment, testing whether his symptoms were connected to something he was consuming at home. The next morning, instead of accepting the breakfast smoothie Avery made him every day, he claimed his stomach was upset and grabbed a protein bar from his truck. The disappointed look on her face made him feel guilty, but he pushed through the discomfort. "You should eat something substantial," she said, concern evident in her voice. "Protein bars aren't enough nutrition for someone working as hard as you do. Just until my stomach settles." At lunch, instead of the carefully packed sandwich Avery had made, he bought a burger and fries from the diner near his shop. The greasy food tasted better than anything he'd eaten in months. For dinner, he claimed nausea and said he'd just have some crackers he'd picked up at the gas station. Avery protested, but Malcolm insisted his stomach couldn't handle anything more substantial. "You need real nutrition," she said, watching him eat saltines at the kitchen table while she and Nico enjoyed pot roast. "You're already losing weight. This won't help you get better. Just for a few days." The second day of eating only food he'd purchased and prepared himself, Malcolm felt slightly better. The constant nausea that had plagued him for months began to ease. By the fourth day, the tingling in his hands had decreased noticeably. After a week of avoiding Avery's cooking, Malcolm felt clearer than he had in months. His energy returned gradually, and for the first time in nearly a year, he worked a full day without needing to sit down. The improvement was dramatic enough that he couldn't ignore it that on day 8, he decided to test his theory. He accepted a cup of coffee Avery had prepared, watching carefully as she stirred in cream and sugar. Within an hour, familiar symptoms returned. Nausea hit him in waves, and his hands began shaking. The mental fog that had been lifting descended again like a heavy blanket. Malcolm excused himself to the bathroom and vomited until his ribs ached. When he looked in the mirror, his face was pale and drawn, exactly as it had been during the worst of his illness. "Honey, you're getting worse," Avery said when he emerged, her face etched with worry. "Maybe we should go to the emergency room." "No, I'll be fine." But he wouldn't be fine. Not until he knew the truth. That night, while Avery slept beside him, Malcolm sat in his garage, staring at his workbench. Every instinct from his military training screamed that he was under attack. But the enemy wasn't foreign soldiers or roadside bombs. The enemy was inside his own house, sharing his bed, raising his son. He thought about Dr. Kumar's words. Intentional administration. Someone was deliberately poisoning him, and there was only one person with constant access to his food and drink. The woman he'd trusted with his life had been slowly taking it away. Malcolm used his lunch break the next day to drive to Phoenix, purchasing surveillance equipment from an electronics store where nobody knew his name. 2 tiny wireless cameras, a recording device, a small computer monitor, and enough cable to hide the connections that he paid cash and told the clerk he was worried about break-ins at his shop. Installing the cameras required careful planning. Malcolm waited until Avery took Nico to his soccer game, giving him 2 hours of uninterrupted access to the house. The first camera went above the kitchen cabinet, tucked behind a decorative vase where it had a clear view of the counter where Avery prepared his meals. The second camera was more challenging. He had to disassemble the smoke detector in their bedroom and install the tiny lens inside the housing, aimed at the medicine cabinet where Avery kept their vitamins and medications. That Malcolm's hands were steady as he worked, muscle memory from his military training taking over. This was reconnaissance, something he understood. Gather intelligence before taking action. The system recorded everything to a hidden hard drive he installed in his garage workbench, concealed behind a false panel he'd built for storing valuable tools. For 3 days, Malcolm reviewed footage that showed nothing unusual. Avery cooked, cleaned, went about her normal routines. He began to wonder if he was losing his mind, if paranoia was another symptom of whatever was wrong with him. On the 4th day, the kitchen camera captured something that made his blood freeze. The timestamp showed 6:47 a.m. Avery stood at the counter in her bathrobe, preparing his morning smoothie. She moved with practiced efficiency, adding protein powder, fruit, and milk to the blender. Then she paused, glancing toward the stairs to listen for movement from upstairs. Satisfied that she was alone, Avery opened a small pill bottle and carefully emptied 2 capsules into her palm. She crushed them with the back of a spoon, scraping the resulting powder into Malcolm's smoothie. She stirred the mixture thoroughly, then rinsed the spoon and returned the pill bottle to its hiding place behind the coffee canister. From the bedroom camera, recorded 2 hours later, Malcolm watched Avery go to the medicine cabinet and remove his vitamin bottle. She used a small eyedropper to add clear liquid to the vitamins, then shook the bottle to distribute whatever she'd added. Malcolm played both pieces of footage 3 times, making sure he wasn't seeing things. Each viewing confirmed what his mind could barely accept. His wife was poisoning him. The woman who kissed him goodbye every morning, who brought him tea when he felt sick, who told neighbors how worried she was about his health, she was the one systematically destroying his body. Malcolm sat at his garage for a long time after viewing the footage, staring at nothing. 11 years of marriage. A son they'd raised together. A life he'd thought was built on love and trust. All of it had been a lie. He thought about confronting her immediately, demanding explanations. But his military training kicked in, overriding his emotional response. Never reveal your intelligence until you understand the full scope of the enemy operation. If Avery was poisoning him, she had reasons. She had a plan, and she was almost certainly not working alone. Malcolm needed to know everything before he made his move. Malcolm became a different person, an actor playing the role of the confused, sick husband while secretly conducting the most important reconnaissance mission of his life. Every morning, he accepted the smoothie Avery made him, drinking half of it in front of her before pouring the rest down the shop drain after she left. He replaced his vitamin bottle with an identical one containing harmless multivitamins purchased from a different pharmacy. The original bottle went into a locked toolbox in his garage, preserved as evidence to take tea home. He played his part perfectly. He forgot conversations that had never happened, mixed up names and dates, complained about symptoms he no longer experienced. Avery responded with perfect concern, adjusting his pillows, bringing him herbal tea, calling doctors to report his continued decline. "You had another episode last night," she told him one December morning, her voice heavy with worry. "You got up around 3 and tried to leave the house. When I asked where you were going, you said you had to report for duty." Malcolm had slept soundly all night, but he nodded gravely and rubbed his temples as if trying to clear his head. "That's scary. What if I hurt myself? What if I wander off and get lost? I've been thinking about that." Avery sat beside him on the bed, taking his hands in hers. Her touch was gentle, loving, the same hands that had been slowly killing him for over a year. "Maybe we should consider getting you some help. Professional care." "You mean like a nursing home?" "Not necessarily, but someone trained to handle memory problems, confusion, episodes like last night. Someone who could keep you safe when I can't." Malcolm let confusion and fear play across his face while inside. His mind was cold and calculating. She was building a case for his incompetence, establishing a pattern that would explain why his testimony couldn't be trusted if he ever tried to expose her. "I don't want to be locked up somewhere. It wouldn't be like that. We'd find somewhere nice, somewhere close by so Nico and I could visit every day." The tenderness in her voice was perfect, Oscar-worthy. If Malcolm hadn't seen the footage of her poisoning him, he would have believed every word. While Avery ran errands that afternoon, Malcolm installed keylogger software on her laptop and smartphone. The programs were military-grade, designed for intelligence gathering, completely undetectable to civilian users. Within days, he had access to everything. Her email accounts, her text messages, her internet search history, her social media activity. The picture that emerged was more disturbing than he'd imagined. Malcolm printed out hundreds of text messages between Avery and someone named Wyatt Lennox. The conversations painted a picture of a relationship that had been developing for nearly a year, starting with flirtation and escalating to explicit sexual content and detailed plans for a future together. But the most damning messages weren't about romance. They were about money. "Wyatt, how much longer until the insurance pays out?" "Avery, doctor says could be another year with natural progression. Maybe less if I increase frequency." "Wyatt, can't wait much longer. My debts are piling up and creditors are getting nasty." "Avery, I upped his life insurance to $800K last month." Forged his signature on the application. "He never reads anything I put in front of him." "Wyatt, you're brilliant. He has no idea what's coming." "Avery, he trusts me completely." It's almost pathetic that Malcolm's hands shook as he read message after message detailing their plot. Wyatt had been encouraging the poisoning from the beginning, researching untraceable toxins and suggesting ways to make Malcolm's death appear natural. "Wyatt, what if someone gets suspicious? What if they do an autopsy?" "Avery, by the time he dies, there will be months of medical records showing progressive neurological decline. Everyone will assume it's early onset dementia." "Wyatt, what about the kid?" "Avery, Nico will be devastated, but kids are resilient. And he'll inherit everything along with me. We'll be set for life." The casual way they discussed his son's future made Malcolm's vision blur with rage. But he forced himself to keep reading, to gather every piece of evidence that they'd made videos. Malcolm found them in a hidden folder on Avery's laptop, footage of him during his worst episodes when the poison was at its most effective. Recordings of him stumbling to the bathroom, looking disoriented and confused. Audio of conversations where his voice sounded slurred and his responses were slowed, as she'd been documenting his decline, building a case for his mental incompetence. But the discovery that nearly broke Malcolm's composure was a video file dated 3 weeks earlier. Avery and Wyatt having sex in the bed Malcolm shared with his wife. In the background, clearly visible on the nightstand, was a framed photograph of Malcolm in his Marine dress uniform. "Wyatt, he'll be gone in a year. We'll sell the shop, Move to California. Just be patient. Avery, I'm tired of being patient. I want my real life to start. Wyatt, your real life is with me. Everything else is just acting. Avery, I'm a good actress. He still thinks I love him. Malcolm stared at the laptop screen until his eyes burned. 11 years of marriage reduced to a performance. Every kiss, every I love you, every moment of intimacy, all of it had been a lie designed to keep him compliant while she slowly murdered him. He thought about Nico, sleeping peacefully upstairs while his mother and her lover planned his father's death in the next room. He thought about all the nights he'd held Avery while she whispered comfort, never knowing she was the source of his pain. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound he'd received in combat. Malcolm called Lucy from a pay phone outside a convenience store 20 miles from Flagstaff, using quarters so the call couldn't be traced to his phone records. I need to see you tonight. Privately. Don't tell anyone, including your staff. Lucy heard something in his voice that made her agree without questions. They met at a truck stop diner where neither of them was likely to be recognized. Malcolm brought a laptop bag containing printouts, medical records, video files, and audio recordings. He spread the evidence across the table like a war strategist planning an assault. Jesus Christ, Lucy whispered after reviewing the surveillance footage. Malcolm, this is attempted murder. It's premeditated attempted murder, conspiracy, insurance fraud, and probably a dozen other charges. Lucy's medical training kicked in as she studied the toxicology reports alongside the evidence of systematic poisoning. The pattern is unmistakable. These substances, administered in small doses over time, she was killing you slowly enough that it would look like natural neurological decline. I need help. Legal help that she can't trace back to me. Lucy made calls to colleagues in Phoenix and Tucson, keeping Malcolm's name out of the conversations. Within 2 days, she'd connected him with Dr. Patricia Wong, a forensic toxicologist who specialized in poisoning cases, and James Rivera, a criminal defense attorney who'd handled domestic violence cases involving attempted murder to Dr. Wong's office was in a medical building that catered to law enforcement agencies. Her credentials covered one-wall medical degree, forensic certifications, expert witness qualifications in dozens of high-profile cases. I've reviewed your test results and the surveillance footage, she said after Lucy made introductions. This is one of the most sophisticated poisoning schemes I've encountered. How sophisticated? Most poisoners either use too much and kill quickly, or too little and achieve no effect. This required precise calculation of dosage, timing, and delivery method. Whoever did this has significant medical knowledge. Avery's mother was a registered nurse, Malcolm said. That explains the technique. The choice of toxins, the delivery method, the way symptoms were allowed to progress. This wasn't amateur work. James Rivera joined them an hour later, reviewing the evidence with the analytical mind of someone who'd spent 20 years prosecuting criminals. The electronic surveillance you conducted exists in a legal gray area, he said. But the medical evidence is overwhelming, and the digital communications provide clear motive and premeditation. What are my options? We take everything to the district attorney. Bypass local police entirely. This level of premeditation qualifies as attempted murder in the first degree. Rivera studied Malcolm with professional interest. I have to ask, why didn't you confront her the moment you discovered what she was doing? Most people would have exploded. Malcolm's response was immediate and certain. Marines don't act on emotion. We gather intelligence, develop a complete picture of the enemy's capabilities and intentions, then execute a mission designed to achieve total victory. And what's your mission objective here? Complete destruction of her life. The same level of destruction she planned for mine. Rivera nodded with appreciation. I can work with that approach. Malcolm found Nico in his bedroom one evening in January, sitting on his bed with a book in his lap, but clearly not reading. The boy had been withdrawn lately, spending more time alone, avoiding family activities. What's on your mind, son? Nico looked up with eyes that held too much worry for a 10-year-old. Dad, can I ask you something? Always. Are you really sick? Like in your brain. Malcolm sat on the edge of the bed, choosing his words carefully. His son deserved truth, but not the complete truth that would destroy his childhood innocence. My brain is fine, Nico. Someone has been hurting me, making me seem sick when I'm not. But I'm getting better now. Who would hurt you? Sometimes people we trust do bad things. It's not your fault, and it's not because you did anything wrong. Nico's lower lip trembled. Is it Mom? The question hit Malcolm like a physical blow. His 10-year-old son had sensed the truth that Malcolm had been blind to for over a year. How did you know? She acts different when you're not around. She talks to someone on the phone and says mean things about you. She laughs when she talks about how you can't remember stuff. Malcolm felt his heart break for this child who'd been living in a house of lies, watching his father deteriorate while sensing his mother's deception. Yes, son, it's Mom. Nico started crying then, deep sobs that shook his small body. Malcolm held him, feeling his own eyes burn with unshed tears. What's going to happen to us? We're going to be okay. You and me, we're going to be fine. But things are going to change pretty soon. Will Mom go to jail? Probably. Good. The word came out with surprising fierceness. I don't want to live with her anymore. I want to live with you. That's exactly what's going to happen. Malcolm held his son until the crying stopped, making silent promises about the future they would build together. Tomorrow, Avery would be arrested. The house of lies would come crashing down. But from the rubble, Malcolm would build something real and honest for his son. Malcolm made sure he and Nico were at the breakfast table when the police arrived at 6 a.m. on a cold February morning. He wanted his son to see justice served, to understand that bad actions had consequences. The doorbell rang, followed by heavy pounding on the front door. Police, open up. Avery appeared at the top of the stairs in her silk robe, looking genuinely confused and frightened. Her hair was disheveled, her face free of makeup, making her look younger and more vulnerable. Malcolm? What's happening? I don't know, he lied, getting up from the breakfast table where he'd been helping Nico with homework. Detective Ray Santos showed his badge when Malcolm opened the door. Behind him stood 2 uniformed officers and a female detective Malcolm didn't recognize. We have a warrant for the arrest of Avery Brantley. What? Avery's voice rose to a shriek that echoed through the house. There must be some mistake. Ma'am, you need to come with us. Avery stumbled down the stairs, her perfect composure cracking like ice in spring thaw. Malcolm, tell them this is crazy. Tell them I didn't do anything. Malcolm looked at his wife with eyes that held no warmth, no recognition of the woman he'd once loved. I can't tell them that, Avery, because it wouldn't be true. Her face went white as she realized the trap had been sprung. You did this. You set me up. You're framing me. Detective Santos began reading her rights while she screamed protests that grew increasingly hysterical. As they put handcuffs on her wrists, she turned to Malcolm with pure hatred blazing in her eyes. You're too stupid to figure this out on your own. Someone helped you. You're absolutely right, Malcolm said with deadly calm. I had a lot of help. From the cameras you never noticed recording you poison my food. From the keylogger software you never detected on your devices. From the doctors who analyzed every toxin you've been feeding me for the past year. Avery's face crumpled as she realized the extent of Malcolm's counterintelligence operation. The smoothies, she whispered. I stopped drinking them months ago. Every morning, I pour them down the drain at my shop. Detective Santos paused before escorting Avery to the patrol car. Mrs. Brantley, I'd like you to hear something before we go. He pulled out his phone and played a recording for the kitchen surveillance system. Avery's voice, crystal clear, saying, he's too stupid to know I'm slowly frying his brain. Avery's legs gave out. The officers had to physically support her as they walked her to the patrol car. Nico watched from the living room window, his small face pressed against the glass. Is it over, Dad? Almost, son. Almost. Wyatt Lennox tried to run when Arizona State Police showed up at his apartment in Sedona that same morning. He made it 3 miles in his rusted pickup truck before they cornered him at a gas station just across the New Mexico border. Malcolm watched the arrest coverage on the evening news from his lawyer's office, James Rivera beside him taking notes. Suspect attempted to flee jurisdiction. The reporter announced over footage of Wyatt being led away in handcuffs. Police recovered evidence linking him to an alleged conspiracy to commit murder. Rivera muted the television. He's already asking for a deal. Wants to testify against Avery in exchange for reduced charges. What kind of deal? 25 years instead of life without parole. He's claiming Avery was the mastermind, that he was just a manipulated accomplice. Malcolm considered this information with the strategic mind of a military planner. Will his testimony help convict her? It'll destroy any chance she has of claiming innocence. He's prepared to admit everything: the affair, the poisoning conspiracy, the insurance fraud. He's even turning over evidence we didn't have. What evidence? Photographs of the actual poison containers. Screenshots of internet research they conducted on untraceable toxins. Audio recordings of conversations where they discussed your funeral arrangements. Malcolm felt something cold and final settle in his chest. They planned my funeral? She had it completely worked out. Service at the Methodist church. Burial in the town cemetery next to your father. She even selected her widow's outfit and practiced looking appropriately grief-stricken. Malcolm stood and walked to the window overlooking downtown Phoenix. Somewhere in the city jail system, Avery was sitting in a cell, finally understanding that her perfect plan had been completely dismantled. Let Wyatt make his deal, Malcolm said. I want the world to hear exactly what kind of woman I married. The trial of Avery Brantley began on a scorching July morning and drew crowds that filled the courthouse every day for 3 weeks. Malcolm sat in the first row behind the prosecution table, wearing his best suit and maintaining the military bearing that had defined his adult life. Avery had changed during her months in jail. She'd lost 20 pounds. Her blonde hair hung limp and lifeless, and dark circles shadowed her once bright eyes. Her defense attorney had dressed her in conservative clothes: navy blazer, white blouse, minimal makeup designed to make her look like someone's innocent daughter rather than an accused murderer. Patricia Marsh, Avery's defense attorney, was a skilled performer who specialized in creating reasonable doubt. In her opening statement, she painted Malcolm as a controlling, paranoid husband who'd orchestrated an elaborate frame-up to cover his own mental illness. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Marsh began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd won dozens of difficult cases. My client is not the monster the prosecution wants you to believe. Avery Brantley is a victim of domestic psychological abuse, manipulation, and an elaborate conspiracy designed to destroy her life. She gestured toward Malcolm. The man sitting behind the prosecution table is not the devoted husband he pretends to be. He's a man whose grip on reality has been deteriorating for years. A man who became obsessed with the idea that his loving wife was trying to hurt him. The prosecution, led by District Attorney Michael Chun, presented their case with methodical precision. Medical experts testified about the sophisticated poisoning scheme. Digital forensics specialists explained the electronic evidence recovered from Avery's devices. Insurance investigators detailed the forged documents that had increased Malcolm's life insurance policy without his knowledge. Dr. Patricia Wong took the stand as the prosecution's star medical witness. She explained how thallium and ethylene glycol affected the human body, how the dosages found in Malcolm's system indicated deliberate, sustained poisoning rather than accidental exposure. In my 23 years as a forensic toxicologist, Dr. Wong testified, I've never seen a more calculated poisoning scheme. The perpetrator had to have extensive knowledge of human physiology and pharmacology to achieve this level of sophistication. But the most damaging testimony came from Wyatt Lennox, that he took the stand wearing an orange jumpsuit, his hands visibly shaking as he was sworn in. Prison had not been kind to him. His face was gaunt, his eyes darted nervously around the courtroom, and his voice barely rose above a whisper. She said we'd be rich, he told the packed courtroom. She said Malcolm was too trusting, too stupid to figure out what was happening to him. Did Mrs. Brantley suggest poisoning her husband? Prosecutor Chen asked. She researched it online for weeks. Showed me articles about thallium poisoning, about how it mimics neurological diseases. She said it would look completely natural if we were patient. What was your role in this conspiracy? Wyatt's voice cracked. I encouraged her. I wanted the money, the life insurance, the business assets. I thought. He wiped his eyes with his sleeve. I thought we could get away with it. Did you have sexual relations with Mrs. Brantley? Yes. Multiple times. In her house. In the bed she shared with Malcolm. Avery's attorney objected to the relevance, but the jury had already heard enough to understand the depth of the betrayal. When the prosecution played the surveillance video of Avery crushing pills in a Malcolm's smoothie, several jurors looked physically ill. One elderly woman covered her mouth with her hand. When they played the audio recording of Avery telling Wyatt that Malcolm was too stupid to live, Avery started crying at the defense table. But the tears looked performative now, calculated rather than genuine. The defense's case crumbled under the weight of physical evidence. Marsh tried to suggest that Malcolm had staged everything, that his paranoia had driven him to elaborate lengths to frame his innocent wife. But the medical evidence was overwhelming, and Wyatt's testimony had demolished any claim of innocence. The state calls Malcolm Brantley to the stand. Malcolm walked to the witness box with the measured stride of a man who'd faced enemy fire and survived. He wore his best charcoal suit and looked directly at each juror as he raised his right hand. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?" "I do." Prosecutor Chen led him through his testimony with careful precision. Malcolm's voice never wavered as he described the progression of his illness, the medical confusion, the gradual realization that someone was poisoning him. "Mr. Brantley, when did you first suspect your wife might be responsible for your illness?" "After Dr. Kumar told me my symptoms were consistent with deliberate poisoning. There was only one person with constant access to my food and medications." "How did that realization make you feel?" Malcolm was quiet for a long moment, considering his words. "Like I've been living with a stranger for 11 years. Like everything I thought I knew about my marriage, my life, was built on lies." "Did you confront your wife immediately?" "No. I needed proof. Accusations without evidence are just words." Chun walked him through the surveillance setup, the discovery of the affair, the digital evidence that revealed the full scope of the conspiracy. "Were you angry when you discovered your wife was trying to kill you?" Malcolm looked directly at Avery for the first time during the trial. She was watching him with tears streaming down her face, but her eyes held no remorse, only hatred for being caught. "No," Malcolm said, and he meant it. Anger is an emotion that clouds judgment. This was about gathering evidence and ensuring justice. During cross-examination, Patricia Marsh tried every strategy to undermine Malcolm's credibility. "Isn't it true that you installed surveillance equipment in your home illegally?" "I protected myself in my own home using legal methods." "Isn't it true that you have a history of violence from your military service?" "I served my country with honor and distinction." "Isn't it possible that your documented illness caused paranoid delusions that led you to believe your wife was trying to harm you?" Malcolm's voice remained steady. "The only delusion I suffered was believing my wife loved me." When Prosecutor Chen asked if he had anything else to say to the jury, Malcolm turned to face them directly. "For over a year, Avery Brantley smiled while I faded away. She held my hand while poison worked through my system. She planned my funeral while I was still alive." His voice stayed calm, but each word hit like a physical blow. "She looked into my son's eyes and lied about why his father was dying. I won't ask for her to rot in prison. I expect it." The courtroom was absolutely silent when he finished. The jury deliberated for 8 hours over 2 days and returned with guilty verdicts on all counts: attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, insurance fraud, and child endangerment. Judge Patricia Williams scheduled sentencing for the following week. The courtroom was packed again when Avery stood to hear her fate. "Mrs. Brantley," Judge Williams said, her voice carrying the weight of 30 years on the bench, "in my career, I've seen many cases of domestic violence, but few as calculated and cold-blooded as this one. You systematically poisoned your husband for over a year, documented his decline for insurance purposes, and planned to profit from his death." Avery's legs shook as she stood beside her attorney. "The evidence shows that you researched methods of untraceable poisoning, forged legal documents, and conspired with your lover to commit murder. Most disturbing of all, you involve your 10-year-old son in this deception. using him as a witness to your husband's fabricated mental decline. Judge Williams paused, letting the weight of the crimes settle over the courtroom. I sentence you to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Malcolm felt nothing when the sentence was pronounced. No satisfaction, no relief, just the quiet certainty that justice had been served according to law. Wyatt Lennox received his negotiated sentence of 25 years and would be eligible for parole in 15 years with good behavior. 3 weeks after the sentencing, a letter arrived at Malcolm's metal shop. Arizona State Prison Stationery. Avery's familiar handwriting. Malcolm, I know you probably won't believe this, but I did love you once. I just got lost somewhere along the way, caught up in dreams of a different life. I'm sorry for what I did to you, and I'm even more sorry for what this will do to Nico. Maybe someday you can find it in your heart to forgive me, so we can both heal and move forward with our lives. I'll always love the man I married. Avery. Malcolm read the letter twice, then walked to his welding station. He fired up his acetylene torch and held the letter over the blue flame until it caught fire, watching the paper curl and blacken. Forgiveness was for people who had earned it through genuine remorse and change. Avery had forfeited that right when she'd chosen poison over love, betrayal over loyalty. Malcolm swept the ashes into his shop's waste bin and returned to his work. 8 months after the trial, Malcolm made 2 major decisions that would reshape his and Nico's future. He sold the house in Flagstaff where too many poisonous memories lived in every room, and he sold his fabrication business to his longtime employee Dave, who'd been running day-to-day operations during the legal proceedings. The combined proceeds, along with the life insurance money that Avery had fraudulently increased, gave Malcolm and Nico financial security for the first time in their lives. They moved to Prescott, Arizona, a smaller town nestled in the mountains where nobody knew there. Story. Malcolm rented a modest house with a large garage that he converted into a custom metalworking studio. Instead of industrial fabrication, he focused on artistic commissions, sculptures for public spaces, decorative ironwork for homes, custom pieces that challenged his creativity rather than just his technical skills. "Dad, what are you making now?" Nico asked one Saturday afternoon, watching Malcolm shape red-hot steel on his anvil. "A sculpture for the new library downtown. They want something that represents growth and learning." "What's it going to look like?" Malcolm paused his hammering, wiping sweat from his forehead. "A tree made of books. The trunk will be made from steel shaped like open books, and the branches will hold more books as leaves." "That's cool. Can I help? Once it's cooled down, you can help me polish some of the smaller pieces." Nico was healing remarkably well considering what he'd endured. He saw a counselor twice a week and had made several close friends at his new school. Most importantly, he never asked about visiting his mother in prison, and Malcolm never offered. Lucy visited every weekend, making the 2-hour drive for Flagstaff with groceries and medical checkups. She'd taken a temporary leave of absence from her clinic to help with Nico's transition and Malcolm's recovery. "You're doing incredible work here," she said one evening, examining Malcolm's latest commission, a memorial sculpture for a local veterans cemetery. "Feels right. Creating something beautiful instead of just fixing what's broken." "How are you feeling physically? Any lingering effect from the poisoning?" "Nothing significant. My hands are steady again. My energy's back to normal. Mentally, I'm stronger than I've been in years." The physical effects of the poisoning had completely resolved within 6 months of stopping the toxic exposure. But the psychological healing took longer. Malcolm still occasionally woke up checking his food for signs of tampering, still felt suspicious when strangers were overly friendly. But the deepest wound, the betrayal of trust, the shattering of his faith and love that was slowly scarring over. Not healing exactly, but becoming something he could live with. Malcolm completed his masterpiece on a crisp December morning, exactly 1 year after moving to Prescott. The sculpture stood 4 feet tall, cast in bronze and steel using techniques he'd perfected over months of experimentation. 2 hands reached toward each other, but only one remained solid and strong. The other hand was dissolving, its fingers melting into droplets that fell like tears to the sculpture's base. Wire bound the hands together, but the binding was breaking as one hand lost its form. The solid hand no longer grasped desperately at its dissolving partner. Instead, it remained open, strong, but no longer trying to hold on to something that was already lost. Malcolm had titled the piece "Silence Isn't Weakness." He loaded the sculpture into his truck using a small crane he'd built for moving heavy pieces. The drive to his house took 20 minutes through Prescott's tree-lined streets. Nico came outside to watch as Malcolm positioned the sculpture in their front yard where everyone who passed could see it. The boy was bundled in a heavy coat, his breath visible in the cold air. "It's really finished. It's finished. What does it mean?" Malcolm studied his creation, considering how to explain complex truths to an 11-year-old. "It means that sometimes the strongest thing you can do is let go, even when it hurts. Are you letting go of Mom? I'm letting go of the person I thought she was. The real person, the one who tried to hurt us. I'll never forgive her for that, but I won't carry her poison in my heart anymore." Nico nodded with the wisdom of a child who'd seen too much but was learning to process it healthily. That evening, Malcolm prepared dinner while Nico finished homework at the kitchen table. Simple food: grilled chicken, steamed vegetables, brown rice, but it was food he'd selected and prepared himself in a kitchen where no one was trying to harm him. The sculpture caught the last rays of winter sunlight through the window, casting intricate shadows on the wall that shifted as the light faded. Malcolm had survived 3 tours in Afghanistan, roadside bombs, firefights that killed good soldiers. He'd survived a marriage to a woman who'd spent over a year slowly poisoning him. He'd rebuilt his life from nothing and created something beautiful from the wreckage of betrayal. The poison was gone from his system. The marriage was legally dissolved. The truth had been told in a court of law, and justice had been served. What remained was a father and son learning to trust the world again, building something real and honest from the foundation of their shared survival. The sculpture stood in their front yard like a guardian, reminding everyone who saw it that strength sometimes meant knowing when to let go, when to stop fighting for something that was already lost. Malcolm finished cooking dinner and called Nico to the table. They ate together, talking about school, about weekend plans, about the future they were building together. Outside, the sculpture caught the light from their kitchen window, solid and permanent against the Arizona night. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.